This is the Mediate Now with Winter Wheeler. Your clear choice for expert mediation and negotiation advice. But it's so much more than that. Take our advice, you will improve your entire life. Are you ready? Let's get to it. Bob Levant has tried over 50 criminal and civil jury trials in his 25-year career in Philadelphia. He secured the largest malicious prosecution civil rights verdict in Pennsylvania history when a jury awarded his client, Kanifa Boozer, $10 million. Having navigated his clients through some of the most politically charged and legally complex cases and crises any lawyer will ever face, makes him a sought-after counselor, lawyer, and problem solver. Bob has developed a unique set of skills, as well as the insight and resilience to help clients and other advocates in any situation they face. Bob's willingness to acknowledge and confront the struggle, self-doubt, and deep vulnerability that accompany trial work differentiate him from other advocates. He has devoted himself to a journey of self-awareness in an effort to dialogue with others about what holds us back and how to unleash our greatest potential. He will soon complete his master's degree in mental health counseling, so he's uniquely positioned to understand the psychological challenges people face. Bob also believes that a daily physical routine is crucial to mental health. He practices yoga daily and is a certified yoga instructor. Well, thank you, Bob. You are my special guest today, Bob Levant. I am so excited that you are with me. Bob, of course, we met on LinkedIn, which is how
that where everybody meets?
Right, that's how I've met everyone this year.
It's where you meet people when you can't go outside.
Exactly. Thank God for LinkedIn. Who would have thought we'd be saying that even January of 2020? But here we are. And so, Bob, what I really, really like about you is how compassionate you are. I love that. I'm totally drawn to that. And it comes across in your posts. I think maybe we have spoken spoken 4 times. But I think you are just one of the coolest people that I have met this year.
Oh, thank you very much for saying that. As I said to somebody recently, my posts are as if someone's invited into my journal. That's kind of how I look at my LinkedIn stuff is I share it and put it out there and try to do it almost as if I was writing to myself. So I appreciate the kind feedback.
That's awesome. And it absolutely comes across that way. And I love it. So, we were having a conversation not too long ago about uncomfortable conversations and how to have them. It made me think about the times that I've tried to have uncomfortable conversations with people and they completely shut down. And so, as a mediator, I'm in the business of telling people things they don't want to hear, things they don't want to know. And my conversations on a daily basis are uncomfortable. And I'm cool with that. But I understand that a lot of people aren't. How do you handle uncomfortable conversations? Are you good with them or what?
We had fun talking about that, and I think, Winter, that they're like muscles that are not used by people enough, and like any other muscles that either aren't used or atrophied, they get stronger by flexing them and utilizing them. I'm not sure that anybody ever gets to a point where they're like, oh, right, I'm having an uncomfortable conversation right now. I can't wait to do it. Let's get at it. I think that what happens is that people start to see a payoff for having the uncomfortable conversations. And that's what builds the muscles. So, if you put it into the mediation context and what you do, I can tell you that what lawyers appreciate most in a mediator is being able to trust them. And not all lawyers will say that, because some lawyers don't want to hear about the bad things in their case, right? They just want to get there and they want to hear about all the good things, and they want to put their fingers in their ears. I am not listening to you about these crappy things in my case. Talk to me about good things. I didn't prep my client to hear about these bad things. Now this is going to be like a whole thing. But I think lawyers that truly are dedicated to the craft, play the long game, both within their case as well as within their career, want to have go-to mediators that they know they're gonna have real credibility with and from. And so you can only do that through having uncomfortable conversations. I think the same thing is true in our personal lives, right? That you get invested in people, and the real, work gets done when you have those dialogues. So the encouragement to do it comes from doing it. Doing it is the hard part.
Right. And obviously this comes up a lot when you're talking about things like race, right? And so I'm thinking back to like a specific situation in which I thought that someone had done something that was, I'll say, insensitive. I didn't ever call it racist, but it was insensitive at the very least, right? And so I brought it to their attention because this is someone that I needed to interact with on an ongoing basis. But they immediately shut down. And then I kind of just got into it. It's like, oh, you've completely shut down, which makes absolutely no sense to me. So I'm just kind of going to poke at it for a little bit, which of course made it worse. So that was not my best moment. But for me, it was more like, why can't we have this conversation? If you're going to shut down on me this quickly, then I'm just, I'm going to poke at it a little bit more and see if I can coax you back out. Of course, that did not work in that situation. But I don't know if that was because of the topic or because this person is just uncomfortable, with the uncomfortable conversation. But to me, in general, I'm okay sitting in that like space of discomfort, if that makes sense. And I think if we get used to that, if we kind of get used to that feeling and realize it's just a feeling like anything else, it will pass, then it's not so hard. It's not so hard to have those conversations. It's not the uncomfortable feeling is relatively fleeting. What do you think?
So a couple of things. One, probably from chatting with me, yoga is a big part of my life, and
yes.
Part of the reason it's so important to me is that it is it's really a metaphor for larger things. So one of my go-to yoga sayings is that it teaches you to become comfortable in uncomfortable positions, right? So it's a metaphor for what you're talking about. And I would also, sort of challenge you to say, well, maybe you said, well, that wasn't my best moment. Well, the alternative was, you're not your authentic self, right? Your authentic self was to poke and push, because it sounds like it was an area that was both important, and obviously personal to you, and meant enough for you to feel that, passion about it. And so when you replied and felt like you were shut down, or the person was then avoiding what had been raised that you wanted to talk about, it may have doubled the uncomfort or discomfort, I should say, for that person. But you don't say anything, then you're sitting with that. So, I just tossed that out kind of as right, as, there's no right answer. There's no right answer. And you and I have talked a good bit about, race in our culture at large, and particularly in legal culture. And, one of the things about this discomfort and learning to sit with it is that, listen, we just have to face the reality that, less than 5% of the lawyers in America are Black, which is pathetically, non-representative of the culture. And yet the profession wants to talk about how to diversify and, how to have inclusion. Well, when it's ruled and controlled by, largely white men, and certainly white lawyers, but particularly white men, well, you're going to have to sit with dialogues that are going to be uncomfortable sometimes in order to make progress, right? So, because otherwise we're just talking about it, right? We're talking about solving problems, and we're not solving problems. So, getting uncomfortable is part of progress. And particularly in this, in the culture of the law, and I think that attitude of having difficult conversations is a unique thing to bring to, the mediation space as well.
Yeah. And while you were talking, it made me think of this meme. I think it's a meme, maybe quote, whatever it is, but I'm not going to continue to be uncomfortable so that you can be comfortable. That's another thing that I have tried to embrace, and relatively recently. I wasn't always like this, I guess. But I did. I finally just said, I am tired of hearing like these microaggressions or ignoring things when they shouldn't be ignored. And if we continue to ignore them, then obviously they perpetuate. If you don't tell someone that they're doing this thing, then it's going to continue. I assume, and I shouldn't assume, but I assume most people are trying to be kind and trying to be polite and simply don't always know better, you know? And so if I bring it up because it has made me uncomfortable, I'm hoping that the other person will recognize that they don't have to make people uncomfortable by doing this one thing. Does that make sense? Because we have to I'm uncomfortable anyway, because it's happened. If I tell you about it, now you're uncomfortable. But if we can sit and have a conversation and we exist in that discomfort for a little while, we can move past it, hopefully, and maybe not have that specific discomfort again.
So, yes, full stop. However, of course, it takes two willing participants to
right.
sit with that discomfort. And so it raises the interesting point of, so I agree with everything you're saying, and not only the premise, but the motivation to continue to have conversations that are uncomfortable, in all areas. But if we're talking about race, particularly around race, because we're not going to have real progress if folks aren't willing to sit with the discomfort of how we got here and how we get out of it. But some of it also, of course, we're a bunch of lawyers, right? It has to do with delivery, right? And so there's the issue of, do you have to lawyer on somebody to get them to put their toes in the water, right? Because at the end of the day, if we find a way to get people to the dialogue, it's probably a better long-term solution than having the dialogue in a way that it's going to happen one time because they're never going to come back for any more. And unfortunately, I think sometimes you have to be really thoughtful about, and this certainly is a place I've moved into over the years, is meet people where they are. That doesn't mean that you have to be inauthentic, but it doesn't also mean that we have to be all of who we are all the time. And, so I can be authentic, I think, and still try to meet somebody where they are, because part of my authentic side, I think, is to have empathy towards others and to strive really hard to be a good listener, and then find a way to get to the meaningful conversations in a way that is productive. And I, that may not be the approach for everybody, but I try to come at it from a place of perspective.
I think that you're really great at that. I love how you have these conversations with people, in the context of a mediation, right? I don't have the time to start really having like changing minds, right? Having deep conversations about why this is a problem. I come in and I say, okay, you can't tell the jurors that this plaintiff was so fat that whatever. Like, you can't do that. And so the response would be, but it's true. Okay. In your opinion, that may be true. However, does saying that out loud get you closer to the goal? No. And so those conversations are the types that I have with people all the time, and they are uncomfortable because as lawyers, we definitely get entrenched in our opinions and our views. You live and breathe these lawsuits. And typically by the time you get to me, it's been a year plus, right? And so obviously no one knows your case better than you do, but that extra set of eyes, that I provide, and the different perspective, I believe is truly, truly helpful. And I feel as though, if I don't have those uncomfortable conversations with my clients, then I have failed them. So you may not enjoy me telling you that your trial strategy is a little bit questionable, but I think at the end of it, if you're ready to listen, if you're ready to hear it, you will appreciate that going forward. Because God forbid you went forward with that at trial and it's just such a bomb. And then you think back, if it didn't settle at mediation, and you think back, well, Winter never said anything to me about that. I don't appreciate that. So I like to have those conversations and kind of see what happens. And typically lawyers are pretty open to it. There's always a way that you approach it, right? And you can tell by their demeanor, like, how do you soften this? Should I say it to them when their client's like not in the room? Do I move them? Do I separate them? How do I deliver this message? But I think once you've had and can have that whole conversation, people can then reflect on it and feel a little bit better about themselves and how they can then go forward with that knowledge. I think people feel better after they have the uncomfortable conversation. It's kind of like, I guess I would analogize it to working out. I hate working out. I hate it. But I know how I'm going to feel once I've done it. I feel really, really good once I've done it. So it's a really hard thing for me to get up every day and go work out. But once I've done it, I'm super proud of myself. And I feel like life is better.
So there are lawyers out there who don't want to hear the reality of their own case or don't want your feedback on what the jury might think. Those are lawyers who, of course, are doing their clients, most importantly, a disservice. That, you're right. After a year or two, nobody knows your case, quote unquote, better than you. But you ain't trying your case to a jury of one, or you and your associate, or three other lawyers, right? You're trying in some ways, the better you know your case, the harder it is to present it to 12 people who not only don't know anything about your case, but may not know anything about the subject matter contained within the case. So listen, mediation is a great tool to learn about your case, to learn about the flaws, to see things in a different way, even if the case ends up not resolving, sometimes to educate your client. And what you bring to the table and what you're identifying is that an effective mediation is where you walk out maybe with the case resolved, maybe not, but you always walk out more knowledgeable about your case and more thoughtful about your case. And if you don't come to a mediation with that perspective, you're not going to maximize it from either direction, whether that's value of your case or whether or not it's presentation of your case down the road. And so people should invite what is not only your way of mediating, but it's like a way of life for you, right? Which is to identify the difficult things and find ways to talk about them. And, if that's how somebody gets known in the mediation space, they're going to be an effective mediator. And quite frankly, over time, people will come to know that and appreciate it as well, right? Here's a mediator that will have those uncomfortable conversations. And, if you then connect that to the racial issues within the law, and that you and I have spoken about on several occasions, again, right, the legal profession is not representative of our nation at large, right, and at all, right, and so not at all. I mean, which is pathetic and a conversation for a podcast of its own. But the right, I mean, or several. The bottom line, though, is that oftentimes it may also be uncomfortable for lawyers to realize that they can't even fully understand or grasp the client's experience when those clients don't look like them, and those clients didn't grow up and don't move about the world as a black woman or a black man or or somebody who is Hispanic or female or Asian or wherever the case might be. So for lawyers to be able to come into a mediation and hear from a mediator who brings a perspective, of a Black woman first and a Black woman in the law as well, that's a powerful tool, but you have to have your ears open. Right. And so that mediator may be able to offer things about a jury panel or jurors or the lawyer's own client or witnesses involved in the case that, quite frankly, the lawyer can't grasp in the same way. And so, these are realities about your case, but you also have to be, honest about yourself and what you bring to the table and what you don't bring to the table. And so I think that at the end of the day, any lawyer obviously should take a deep breath and say, okay, this might hurt a little bit, but I want to take the bad medicine and sometimes really good medicine, but I want to know everything about my case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have that type of conversation all the time with attorneys who don't look like their clients. If their client looks like me, if their client speaks with a dialect, sometimes I'll be in the room and I'll hear, someone speak in African-American vernacular English, and I will realize that the interpretation of what was said is wrong. It happens all the time. I'm like, that's actually not what she said. She said this. It's typically it's the double negative that screws people up. But yeah, so, sometimes I do have to have those conversations, and I know that can be uncomfortable and even embarrassing for the attorney. But would you rather be embarrassed in a small room with me or in front of the judge and the jurors who are going to be like, how does he not understand what his own client is saying?
But isn't the broader question, should you be embarrassed about, just learning something? Right? That's really what we're talking about, right? Right? Should you be embarrassed that you're a white dude who may not have understood what, somebody who's not a white guy said or what their life experience? I mean, that's not embarrassing. That's reality in our culture. So, that's really what we're talking about is how willing are you to just be open to all the learning opportunities that are available to you in a narrow sense of about your case, kind of air quotes. But how about just how that applies out and about in the world where we live every day? That's like the fabric of what we're talking about here, right?
Right. And so I definitely pride myself on the fact that I have that different perspective. I am different from most mediators, being relatively young, Black, and a woman, and doing this full time as my career. I check a bunch of boxes that most people don't check. And so I see things very differently than most people, frankly. But I love that. I love being able to show people, you didn't think about it this way. You didn't think about it that way. And especially in a city like Atlanta, which is where I live, which is predominantly Black, majority Black. But of course, our legal system, it's not majority Black. So we still have the same problems that everyone has everywhere across the country. But I definitely want to go into each mediation being prepared to have whatever conversation needs to happen, and hopefully touching that person in such a way that they'll think about it going forward, that they might consider that this is an issue in another case that I have, potentially. This was a blind spot that I had that is no longer a blind spot. And, maybe they'll send me a little shout out. Thanks, Wint. Right? But I think that my approach in constantly telling people what they don't want to hear and making them uncomfortable really is the best thing for them long term. It's the best thing for their clients. It's probably the best thing for their practice going forward.
I mean, I would say yes to all of that. I mean, it's the best thing for you to be who you are and to be your authentic self as a mediator and as a human being. And that translates into the cases because you always benefit from a broader perspective, right? As a lawyer and as a human being. So quite frankly, if I have the option of a mediator who looks like me or doesn't look like me, I want a mediator who doesn't look like me. because I may hear and learn things different, right? Now, sometimes, you're strategic about your cases. I may want a mediator who looks like my client because I want to have dialogue that my client can participate in and benefit from, where they get a perspective, outside of mine. And there may be things about the case that I'm concerned about that I'm concerned won't be heard in the same way, or things that I think are really important in the case that the client may hear in a different way, right? So, mediation is always a tool for that. And quite frankly, as you said, right, the legal system is not representative of our country at large. But, our clientele and the people involved in cases are representative of our country at large, right? Jurors and witnesses and the people involved. So, what you offer is something that is incredibly unique that the profession needs. And quite frankly, it's our own fault that there's not more of it, right? Because we haven't worked hard enough at diversity and we haven't had the uncomfortable conversations. Hopefully, there's a shift just by what we're doing here, today on a day in and day out basis. But we still have a long way to go for the profession to catch up until there are more Winter Wheelers, not that will be you, but, more mediators who look like Winter Wheeler, right? More lawyers who look like Winter Wheeler, more judges that look like Winter Wheeler, right? And quite frankly, more police officers that look like Winter Wheeler, and on and on and on, right? But until such time, you are a commodity and one that people should take advantage of in any way that they can.
I appreciate that.
It's true, right? These are the real dialogues to have, right? If you go on Google as a lawyer, and I get a case down in Atlanta, or in wherever in the South, in Georgia, and or anywhere in the country, and I'm looking for a mediator. If I just put in mediator, Georgia personal injury cases, most of the people are going to look like me, not you. That's just the reality of practice of law, right? If I go to one of the mediation companies and I look at their panel, most of the folks are going to look like me, not you.
100%, yeah.
And that's not a good, right? Not necessarily a good thing. So
I'm working hard to, not only to build my practice, but I'm a genuine believer of giving and lifting as I climb. I'm very generous. And I try to mentor younger lawyers, younger mediators, aspiring mediators, and encourage them to get into this field. It is really a great space in which to work. And we really do need more people of color because, like you said, the clients that the attorneys are serving, they are representative of society. So, sometimes I'll have attorneys who come in and they literally don't speak the language of their client, not just they're misunderstanding a dialect. This is a language they don't know. But another thing that you brought up that I definitely want to talk about is empathy. Empathy is huge in mediation. And I think that attorneys and mediators alike, I think they overlook that. A lot of people focus just on the numbers. What's the black letter law? What, medical bills am I going to be able to blackboard? What am I going to be able to get an expert to say? But a lot of that doesn't have to happen if you take the time to listen to the parties themselves. Because what I've noticed is that, yes, these people want money. They want to be compensated. But a lot of it has to do with just how they feel about the situation and how no one has been listening to them. And I think back, and I feel a little bad about this now, but as a litigator, I didn't have time to just sit and listen to my client complain, right? I didn't have time for that. I had so many other cases. I just had to keep moving. And so I would tell them, if you're feeling this badly, you should seek out therapy. I'm not a therapist. I'm a litigator. This is not, the touchy-feely stuff is not what I do. But now as a mediator, the touchy-feely stuff is what I do. And I spend a good amount of time typically talking to the plaintiff about this, and occasionally an uninsured defendant, but typically as a plaintiff. And we talk about the fact that this is their day. If you want to get this done and you want to forego a trial, this is the day. So you want to yell, you want to scream, all that stuff you couldn't do in court. A judge is not going to listen to you yell and scream. I will. You want to talk about it? You want me to understand how you feel and why and all the other terrible things that have happened to you, since whatever accident? Let's do that. And then, of course, I have to help the attorney walk that client emotionally back through the fact that, okay, a lot of that is actually not something that you can be compensated for, but I hear you. I understand you. I see why you're upset. But this is not about the accident. This is not about the lawsuit. So I gave them the opportunity to vent and have all of that and genuinely engage with them. And then it makes it easier to bring them back to what is actually compensable. And then we can start to have a real conversation about numbers that are actually going to get the case resolved.
You make a critical point, which is that within the law, the culture is often, I don't want to say the lawyers themselves are not empathetic, but the culture pushes you toward this. Well, I'm your lawyer. Here's, what your case is worth. Here's what I can put on the board. Here's what your medicals are. And they get their back up, or they get into a corner in discussions about the value of the case, right? Because they just want the client to see it their way. Like, oh my God, the client's being unreasonable. It's going to be so hard to get this case settled. And they revert to their own comfort area, which, on the point of uncomfortable conversations, right? They go to their comfort place, which is they lawyer on the client, right? Rather than just listen to the client. And I don't think that comes from people not being empathetic at their core. It comes from this overall culture of, not wanting to embrace the fears and the anxieties. I have this money invested in the case. I just want it to settle. So I'm just going to keep saying these things that make sense to why the case should settle in my own head. If my client were some clone of myself, and I were having this reasonable discussion with another, lawyer, and I could sort of lawyer on my client, and we go to that comfortable place because we're just thinking, oh my gosh, I have this invested in the case, and the case is only worth this, and they don't realize that the injuries, while they were bad for the client, aren't going to appear this way in court, and there's going to be an expert on the other side, and on and on and on. The much more effective and direct way often is what you're identifying, which is just show some empathy, take the lawyer lab coat off, right? Stop, lawyering on the client and hear what they're saying. And it's a great point you make, which is that mediation is an opportunity to do that if you have a strong mediator who understands that, who is both well-versed in the art of mediation, but also a sophisticated person as you are. So it takes a number of things in the toolbox and some emotional and intellectual dexterity to do it. But done correctly, like you're describing, it can move things, to a really good resolution that they might not otherwise have gotten to. So
Absolutely.
Kudos for, doing it, talking about it, putting it out there. And making that the message about how you approach mediation, and it sounds like the rest of your life as well.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if my husband enjoys that, but but yes.
No, I'm guessing he knew what he was signing up for. I don't think you were. I don't think you were hiding in the tall grass. I think you were.
No.
You made it pretty clear, probably so.
Yeah, I think I did. But, sometimes when I'm trying to have these conversations with attorneys, if it's the first time that they've mediated with me, they are obviously very uncomfortable. For example, I had a mediation a few weeks ago where it was a virtual mediation. So sometimes those are a little bit odd with how people have decided to set themselves up. And in this situation, the client was actually in the attorney's office, and there was an associate in the room, and there was a tech person in the room. There's a lot of stuff going on in this room that they're in. But the plaintiff himself, he was at the far end of this huge table, so I could barely see him. And I feed off of people's energies. I do. I need to be able to see your face to understand how you're responding to me. I don't think that that's unusual, but I need to be able to see your face. I want you to be able to see me very clearly. And so I just asked, I said, can you move your plaintiff toward this part of the room? Because I can't see him. And the attorney was like, well, I'm already all set up over here and I've got this going on and that going on. And I said, I understand that. And I understand that this is not going to be easy or, whatever. But I really do need to be able to see and speak to your client while we're going through this. That's part of my process. That's part of the method that I'm using. If I can't even see them, it makes it very difficult. So the attorney did go ahead and and move. Although afterward, he was like, at the end of the mediation, he was like, I really didn't like that you did that. But looking back, it made perfect sense. I understand it. My client feels a lot better about what happened. And thank you. I get it now. So, sometimes, like you were saying before, you have to trust your mediator. And if you don't trust your mediator and their process, you've got the wrong mediator.
Yeah, or you might have the right mediator and you might have the wrong mindset. So,
well, yes.
That's part of the conversation we're having too. So,
right. I think mindset is really important, but I don't know how to change mindset on like a macro level. I feel like that's your thing, Bob.
No, I mean, listen, all you can do is I don't profess to be able to change anybody's mindset, right? Through dialogues like this, I try to offer people an opportunity to just reflect. All you can do is share where you're coming from and invite the other person to give some real thought to, what their mindset is, right? Do I want to hear the things that make me feel good, or do I want to hear the things that make me better? And that's for each of us to answer.
But I think that's part of what makes you an excellent coach. I really, really do. And you're not my coach technically, but we have had a couple of conversations that definitely felt like coaching. And they were great. And I felt motivated and happy when we were done. And I know several people who've had conversations with you where they'll call me and they'll be like, I just spoke to Bob and all I did was cry. Why is that? Because Bob is the best person to talk to. That's why. You've got this amazing energy. And I know that you know that, because otherwise you wouldn't have gotten into coaching. You're very empathetic. You know all of those things about yourself. But it is, Bob, truly, truly amazing. It's truly special to find someone like you that you can instantly connect with. Like, it's crazy. Like, it comes across, like I said, in your posts, in your podcast, in me looking at you right now on the screen. Like, I can feel how earnest you are. Like, you are yourself and you want everyone else to feel good about themselves too. And it's wonderful. And so I have been recommending your coaching to everyone.
That's like about the nicest thing anybody could say to me. Thanks. No, really. I mean, I all I'll say is I love our talks and our chats. All I'll say is that, listen, I spent a long time in the law. You probably heard me say this, muscling my way through, getting by on, hard work and some talent and a bunch of other stuff, moxie. And it was at a point where I realized that, if you embrace the difficulties and the challenges and the tough conversations, that on the other side of that is, a far better advocate and I think a, far better person than you would have. And so a lot of what our conversation has been about today is, barriers that exist in society, but they're particularly strong within the law, right? Lawyers are particularly averse to some of the things we're talking about. And so what I say to people is this, right? You will be more successful. You will make more money. You will be a better lawyer if you do the things in your professional and personal life that you, Winter, and I are talking about today, which is just owning your you-know-what, putting the stuff out there, really thinking about it, feeling it. It's going to do all those things. And I'm a believer that's the way the dialogue, listen, you got to have the dialogue honest, right? And so lawyers have to know you're going to get better, you're going to make more money, your cases are going to go better, everything's going to work better if you work through the aversions that we all have to the discomfort. So, that's the fabric of what we're talking about. And I truly appreciate those kind words. And that's the place that it comes from, though, is that I have a deep belief that it across the board will make folks better.
Yeah. I mean, that's clear that you genuinely believe that. I know you do. And so I want you to tell us a little bit about your podcast, Iron Advocate, because it is amazing. So I want to hear how you describe it in your own words.
Thanks. Iron Advocate is a podcast I do with my best friend and colleague, Jeff Riebel, who's a lawyer out in California. And what we do is we really try to get at the inner game of advocacy. We try to talk to lawyers who are kind of at the tip of the spear and figure out what they are doing in their lives and in their professional lives, make them great, and do it in a way that isn't destroying them. So our tagline is killing it in the practice of law without it killing you. That's what we try to bring forward. And it's really, the show's only as good as our guests. We've been enormously blessed with unbelievable guests. We had Carl Racine, who's the Attorney General in Washington, D.C., who was also the first Black managing partner at an Amwell 100 firm. And he was incredibly open about that experience, which was really taxing on him emotionally and professionally. We've had on, we had Ann O'Leary, who's the chief of staff to Governor Newsom, who graced us in the middle of a pandemic and came on and spoke with us, and just amazing people. And, we just try to kind of serve that way by getting people on that have something that we can all learn from. Most of all, Jeff and I, we learn every episode. And so that's it. That's you can check us out at ironadvocate.com. It's got tons of information about us, so we appreciate that plug. Thank you.
I listen to Iron Advocate. I think I came across it just a few months ago, I guess, but I'm loving it. And you've been doing like the lives. That has been really cool. I attended the one on imposter syndrome. And that was an incredible conversation. I love talking about imposter syndrome. I write about it sometimes. And so to hear, it's easy for me to say my imposter syndrome is about being a woman and it's about being Black. And what I have learned over the past year is that everyone can suffer from imposter syndrome. And frankly, and I hate to admit it, it was surprising to me that other people have that problem. I just didn't think that they did.
That's what it's about, right? That's what imposter syndrome is. Everybody else is fine. I'm messed up, right? Right. We had like, it was incredible, right? We had there was 60 plus people were on that call. We learned, we laughed, we had a ton of fun, and you're right. I mean, to me, listen, part of it is first of all, I don't like the word syndrome, right? Because it's like some kind of an affliction. Oh, I'll take medicine and get better. So I don't love that like syndrome word. But the bottom line is I classify imposter syndrome as any time that we say like, what are other people going to think? Should I do that? What if? Any form of questioning ourselves, grows from that kind of place. And as you point out, that's even more difficult when you look around and find less people that look like you, right? I mean, I'm like from Central Casting as like, some white lawyer, right? I mean, if they call like, oh, we need we need a lawyer, right? I show up, and I'm battling it all the time. Like, who am I to say this or think this or do that, right? So, it's a lot of it is perspective, but any time you hear a statistic like, 70% of lawyers suffer from imposter syndrome. I mean, that's fine, but the other 30% either lied or they didn't return the survey. So, It's, I mean, it is what it is, right? We're going to suffer every time. You're starting this awesome new podcast. I guarantee you that before that, the conversations start going live, you're going to be like, oh, what are people going to think? And
it's happening
am I really ready to
already.
do this? Right? Is this good enough? Right. Well, we're on episode like 28, and I'm like, oh man, we got to put ourselves out there again. So it doesn't stop. It's again, that's the uncomfortable conversation with yourself, right? That's walking toward your own stuff. I'm speaking about me now, right? That's me walking toward my own stuff, right? I'm just worried about what people are going to think and say. And at some point in time, you just got to walk toward that and realize that it won't go away. You just have to, you got to answer the doorbell when it's ringing every day and talk to whoever's there when you open it, right? So.
Right. And I've changed so much over the past year. Like 2020 has just, it's been hopefully an anomaly, hopefully an anomaly. But I spent like all of 2020, like basically figuring out how to reinvent myself and like turn all of those soft skills, those networking skills that I had and I was great at in person, and make that translation to the digital space. And it was overwhelming. It was absolutely overwhelming. And my community, I know lots of people and I can go out and I socialize with them and I'm in all of the quote best clubs and I'm in leadership and I'm doing all of these things, but when you're on LinkedIn and people have no idea who you are and they don't particularly care, it's hard to just start writing those posts. It's hard to put yourself out there. And so I think that for me, it's been, I want to say validating, but I don't think validating is the right word. It's been validating, I'll start with that, to have people connect and say, I feel this way about these things too. I appreciate what you're saying. This has helped me. But at the same time, it also feels very much like, oh my goodness, people are listening to me and I don't want to mess that up. I want to deserve and earn the respect and the accolades. And I know that I work hard. I know that I'm doing the absolute best that I can do. I know that I'm constantly, intentionally learning new things. But it's still that little nagging voice that's like, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, if you're waiting for that to go away, I don't believe it's going to happen. So,
Right.
I don't. And I mean, that's always been part of my journey. And that really manifested itself, with the whole Iron Advocate experience, both the podcast, coaching, strategizing with lawyers and firms. It became clear to me that no matter what I do or, accomplish, there's always going to be that voice inside that says, well, who am I to X, Y, or Z? And I think, that is the tipping point. And I can only speak for my own journey, but when I talk to folks and you and I talk to others, that's the tipping point, I think, as a lawyer and probably as a human being as well, is the recognition that if you're waiting for that to stop, you're going to be waiting until the end of time. If you move toward it and you embrace it, then you can really unlock whatever your next great post is, or your next conversation that turns a mediation or a relationship. And then the next day, you'll still return to that voice. Well, do I really know what I'm doing? Who am I to say this, or the dreaded what are other people going to say? And that's just something you have to embrace. I mean, listen, after trying more jury trials than I could ever want to count back, I still say, well, what are people going to care what I have to say about, about trying cases or doing that? And that's okay, but I feel that way. That's just natural, and you move into it. And then you say what you have to say. And people want to hear it, they can listen to it, and if they don't, then go to the next post. They can read Winter's post. They can skip over mine.
Yeah, but I hate that it seems like it really never goes away, because you obviously have
It
you have an
really never
impressive,
goes away.
Impressive track record that like it never goes away. My God,
It never goes away. At least I, you know, and again though, right? That was part of the journey for me is, okay, well, you know, now I've tried 40 trials, and, you know, now the next one I won't be worried that I'm going to forget everything I want to say to the jury, or that I'm going to be like, well, they're not going to laugh at this joke, or they're not going to, right? Okay, now I've done 50 jury trials. It's sure to go away now, right? It doesn't go away. It's just that, you know, embrace this. And so when you translate that into, you know, sharing your journey or talking, coaching, teaching, strategizing, I think that, you know, whomever the mythical, you know, wisest, greatest teacher out there is, they have to come from a place of being willing to admit that when I walk out here to, you know, teach or share with these folks, that I'm wondering whether I have anything of use to say. Okay. So, you know, whether you're Buddha or whoever you are, on some level, you're questioning yourself. That's my, you know, that's my take on this. But
yeah, and you know, thankfully for me, I have my husband who's like my hype man. He also runs tech. But you know, like I got a really amazing email asking me to speak, and like I can't even fathom like actually doing this. And my initial instinct was to say no. There's no way I can do that. And you know, my husband was sitting next to me, thank God, and he said, "Are you crazy? They wouldn't have approached you if they didn't think you could do it. And of course you can do it. You talk to people all the time.
yeah,
You're a great speaker. You can do this."
well, you embrace it. You embrace it. You know, I point in my career, I have no problem telling, you know, go in front of 12 people and, you know, a jury and say, listen, it's really hard to stand here and talk to 12 strangers. It's okay to tell them that, right? So there's whatever your greatest you know, talk is for that invitation that you just, you know, recounted, that receiving, you're going to be at your very best moving toward your stuff, sitting down with it, putting your arms around it and saying, hey, welcome to my life, you know, anxiety and fear and all that, right? Now let's get to work and figure out what we're going to tell these people, you know, who you were, you know, quote unquote, dreading speaking to or moving away from, right? As soon as you move, sit down on the couch, put your arms around them, let's get at it. And that'll become part of, you know, become some part of your talk, right? It may be direct, it may be subtle, but it'll become some part of it. And that's trying cases, that's mediating, you know, that's moving about your kind of daily life.
Absolutely.
And lawyers should do more of it.
I'm glad you picked up on my anxiety.
I didn't pick up on your anxiety. I just know it's part of everybody's makeup. So that's you're just willing to talk about it on a podcast.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, I do. I have severe anxiety.
You know,
it is what it is.
Well, welcome to Earth, Winter. We've been waiting for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the welcome.
We've all got it. So yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, it's just a matter of being terrified and doing it anyway. Really?
Being terrified, acknowledging you're terrified, owning that, and then doing it anyway.
Yep.
Because I think it's important folks don't miss the middle step. You could be terrified and do it anyway, or you could be terrified and say, wow, I feel terrified. And that's all right. And, you know, then I'm going to use that. You know, I'm going to use it to my advantage. So.
Well, I guess. How do you use?
Because it frees you. It frees you. Right? It's liberating. Right? So if you say, I'm terrified, I'm going to do this anyway, that's what I refer to as like muscling your way through it. Right? I'm scared, but I'm going to do this anyway. Right? Or there's, I'm scared. Let me really sit with what I'm scared about and how much of that is real. Am I really going to forget what I'm going to say? Am I really, really worried I'm going to sound stupid? Or am I buying into all of this kind of, you know, terror and allowing it to get hold of me? Right? Or am I going to sit down and say, yeah, it's uncomfortable, and a little scary to do this, but when I sit with it and I really think about it, I think about my process and why the people invited me, because I am engaging and, and have something to offer. Now it starts to reduce itself, right? And so it's the liberation it's the power. Right. It's you're going to do it anyway. Right. But you could either like run around and like, keep the boogeyman at bay until the presentation's over, or you could move into that, sit with all of it, get liberated, and then go out and
do it
and be the very best version of yourself that you can be, which is going to come from that liberation, not from muscling your way through it. Right. You're going to do it either way.
And then sometimes before I'm about to do something that is absolutely terrifying, I consider, even if you mess this up, so what? Like, what happens really?
Life goes on.
Exactly.
Right?
I will see another day.
And again, ask yourself the question: how am I likely to be at my best?
So, Bob, I think that definitely kind of brings us full circle when we're talking about uncomfortable conversations and being in discomfort and being okay with that. So, for me, being immediately uncomfortable at the thought of having to give this talk, I'm definitely going to do it. I'm terrified, but I'm going to do it. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. Yeah, I'm putting that into the universe.
Listen, it everything we talked about, right? The theme that runs through it is, have the uncomfortable, sit with the uncomfortable feelings, have the uncomfortable dialogues. That starts with yourself. That's sort of the end of our dialogue is you being open enough to talk about it through yourself. If you wind us back to the beginning and other people's discomfort, it all kind of starts with each of us making a commitment to say, all right, well, this feels a little funky or uncomfortable, or it's inducing terror in me or fear or anxiety or all of the above. And, rather than, stick your proverbial fingers in your ears, you're going to move into it. You're going to feel it, talk about it. And that's why you're going to kill it. Not just because, right? But because you're going to think about it and move into it. So that's what it's all about. Keep on keeping on and doing what you do. And I'm excited to be on the podcast and to watch it grow and hear from other folks and see you kind of continue to crush the legal universe and beyond like you've been doing. So.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you being here.
It was awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Mediate Now. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Music and audio editing provided by Encompass Podcast Studio. Take our advice. You will improve your entire life.